Blackwood Broadcasting Studios at an undisclosed Institute of Higher Learning. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, and we're happy to have all of you along with us today. Back in the late 90s, I frequented a record shop in Boston called Looney Tunes. It was a muddled store with records stacked on boxes. One day I stumbled across an album with my guest as bass player. He played double bass and was part of the organic and vibrant Southern California jazz scene that was made up of Gerald Wilson, Bud Shank, Harold Land, Carmel Jones, Frank Strazzeri, and others. He has continued his prodigious work over the years as an actor and a player. And most recently, his latest albums have been under the tutelage or the label of Skipper Productions with his wife, on a continual landscape of self-expression and creativity. It's an honor to welcome Putter Smith to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hi, Jake.
Hi, Putter. How are you, sir?
Pretty good.
Yeah,
I'm not an actor.
Okay, so let's correct that for the record, because that in the All Music Guide, it says that you did
I
it.
know. I was in a movie once, but I'm not an actor. Denzel Washington, Meryl Streep, Javier Bardem, those are actors. I was in a movie once, you know.
So yeah, I feel you. You're not. That's not a career.
No, I was in a movie, just one movie, and then I did a couple little things later. But on the strength of having been in a movie, but I was never an actor. I wouldn't disgrace the term by calling myself one.
You know, I haven't seen the film, and but how did that come about?
Well, I was working with Thelonious Monk, which I'm very proud of, and the director was in Hollywood. This is in 1970 or something like this, and the director came in. They were casting for the movie Diamonds Are Forever, James Bond movie, and I got a call about 3 months later asking if I was Thelonious' bass player. Of course, I said yes, and they asked me to come to Universal, and I thought they needed a bass player, a sideline or something, you know. And I didn't know it was a Bond movie or anything. And then they hand me a script. I get in there and they hand me a script, and I go, "What? You're kidding? What?" And because my wife had been taking acting classes, and I would help her with her homework, I knew how to read a script, so I just read it, and they laughed, and then I did a screen test with Paul Williams. Was the original. There's two guys that hold hands in the movie, and I was Paul Williams was the guy I did the screen test with, and he very kindly told me what to do, and I got the gig, and then he didn't. I think it was he wanted more money than they wanted to pay, but he was very helpful. And the other person that was very helpful was Med Flory. As I talked to Med, and I said, "Med, you know, I'm supposed to do this movie. I don't know a goddamn thing. Pardon me, gosh darn thing." And he says, and so he says, well, he says, you know, and he told me about whatever you're doing with your hands when you say the line, try to remember that. So when they retake it again, so you can be doing the same thing, you know. And any movements you're making, try to have them be timed to. And that was very, very helpful. And, of course, then I started noticing when actors didn't do that in movies. I became a huge fan of movies after that. Before that, I had just liked movies. Now I'm a ridiculous fan.
You're a big fan. But, I mean, talk about the overlap of entertainment. Again, granted, Putter Smith is not an actor, but the crossover of entertainment and how acting and also being within a quartet in music, the overlap there in kind of emotion and the similarities that of cross-cultural or of cross-entertainment, rather.
Well, I wouldn't relate it at all, because I was simply would be given a line and I would say it. Whereas in music, I'm part of a organic living thing that we're all in communication all the time. But I was in no kind of communication in that. I was just saying lines, and anybody could do it. Absolutely, anybody can do it. You know, it's just a matter of not freaking out. You know, just say it like as if it's you, as if you're that person and you're saying that.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
mean, just breathe and don't bug out. That's exactly.
Well, my wife said, remember, they called you, you didn't call them. And so, I didn't try to act like anything, like a character. I just went in and said the lines as if it was me saying them, and then that was it. But I mean, like I was talking to those other actors, they can go in and be somebody else, and did you see Meryl Streep in Julie and Julia?
I know her.
Well, she was later on. She was playing Julia Child, and later on they had a replay of a Julia Child show, and I thought, well, gee, Meryl Streep did better Julia Child than Julia Child.
That's the testament of a true actress.
That's an actor.
Yes, yes.
That's a great actor.
Well said. Yeah, well, let's get down to brass tacks because. If you would, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about when you were, still wet behind the ears, just an aspiring bass player. I want you to put me back in that time of the burgeoning music scene that was Southern California. Talk to me about that.
Well, I don't know that I've ever been really in the center of the whole thing. It was almost a fluke that I began playing. My brother, Carson Smith, was a great bass player who's passed away.
Who did he play with?
He played with everybody: Charlie Parker, Billie Holiday, Clifford Brown, Zoot Sims. But his probably his most famous work. Well, he was in the Chico Hamilton quintet when they had the cello Fred Katz and.
That's where I know that name from. Jim Hall was in that group too.
He was also when the Jerry Mulligan Quartet. He did 4 or 5 with them, and then the original Chet Baker quartets and all that stuff. And he's a great bass player. And if you listen to his stuff now, it just sounds great. He's like exceptionally good bass player. He passed away, I think in '66. It isn't at the not '66. It's not my. Let's see. I'm trying to think. He was 66. That's 15 years ago. Anyway, he had gone. He was 10 years older than I was, and he went to New York when I was 18. When I was 8, okay, and he left a half-size bass back, and I used to fool around on it, and then. When his records came out, I would play along with the records and just fooling around. I didn't know a damn thing. And then when I started junior high school, somebody came up to me. I was 13. They said, "Are you Carson's brother?" And I said, "Yeah," because Carson was very famous at that time as on the West Coast jazz bass player. And they said, "Would you play bass?" I said, "Oh yeah." And he said, "Well, we got a job next Thursday night." So I went and played Compton Community Center for $3. I got to the gig. I didn't have a bass cover. I only had 3 strings, and but I knew what it was supposed to sound like. I don't think people could do that these days because music has become so complex. But at that time, just getting up there and playing by ear and swinging was enough. And my career started. And by the time I was 16, I was working 6 nights a week in Compton again in a place called Mangold's. I worked with a piano player named Joanne Grogan, whose name now is Joanne Burkeen.
Wow.
And a guy, Pete Applin, and tenor player, and Reed Vaughn, drummer. We used to play with these people. I was 16 years old, still in high school, and so I played a lot. I began playing all the time, and in those days you would work at a place 6 nights a week for a month with 2 1-month options, which they'd always pick up. So kids ask me, how do you learn tunes? Well, the way I did is I'd work a gig like that, and by the time 3 weeks is up, you know everybody's material. And then you go work another gig, and you learn all their material. I don't know how they do it now.
I wanted to ask you that you just said something interesting to me. You said music today is more complex. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, try sitting in with Brad Mehldau.
Right.
They're playing in odd times, and
but that was going on too with Don Ellis and Emil Richards and all those guys.
Well, you wouldn't sit in with Don Ellis either.
Right.
I was playing like, it was just a few steps up from swing music. Like
right.
When you listen to Charlie Parker, if you know how to play the blues, you could sit in if you had a good groove going, and that's the way it was, and it was very, very much street music, and now it's so sophisticated that I just don't see it as street music anymore, although I love street music.
Yeah, I think there's something to the urban feel of the music and sort of the indigenous quality of the music that spawned a lot of that creativity, whereas now everything is a bit too polished, and perfection seems to be a little bit too much in vogue, especially with younger generations of musicians, as opposed to just swinging, And I attribute that to the inability of younger musicians to be able to actually physically connect and be intimate with those first generation musicians, guys like Bird, Muddy Waters, the blues guys, where you could literally see Art Blakey in a club and be right there with him. The sweat would be flying off of him, hitting you in the face. And you were able to see how he carried himself and the kind of leadership and how he dealt with the rest of his bandmates. And, just the accessibility to those leaders is lacking in today's music. They lack identity because they're not necessarily they're not with regular people.
Well, yeah, so it was, I think, more rough and ready. Although the scene in New York is a lot of rough and ready places, and there's a lot of places you can go right there and be in the room, small room. It's the big clubs like Birdland and Blue Note, and in L.A. Catalina's are another story. They're like financed by record companies, and singers who go in and rent the room, and not all of them, I don't mean, but they're not really what I could think of as a jazz room, like a little joint that's barely making it, and that's full of people, young people watching the music and getting into it, and just like Smalls and the 5-5 Club, and I haven't seen that much of New York, even though I go back there real often and play. I mean, the scene is really great there.
The question is the propensity of clubs, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Talk about the importance of how a musician could develop because of those venues.
Well, I think basically what you're talking about is why jazz isn't popular anymore, and I have a whole opinion about that. I think it's the triumph of the avant-garde imitators which I don't agree with at all. I don't like that kind of music. It doesn't sound good to me. It doesn't feel good, and it's like. Bebop has got a lot of anger in it. When you listen to Bird and Diz, there's a lot of anger in that music, but there's a lot of joy. But one thing there is a tremendous intelligence in that music. Intelligence. And the modern avant-garde, starting with, I know it was a Sacred Cow to everybody, Ornette Coleman and all that stuff, was like the critics came out, and next thing you know, there's all these people that can't play at all and being extolled as genius. And to me, it's very similar to the condition of art in the world today, where all these painters that can't paint are being talked of as genius, and it's like the talking about it and makes it so, but it doesn't. And people have to like the music. And so when you go in and you go hear jazz and it sounds awful and not connected and you can't make any sense out of it, then you go, I don't like jazz, throwing everything out with that because this one thing kind of rose up and sold, what does a jazz record sell, 30,000 copies? And it turned everybody around, sort of, and it turned jazz around, and it became unpalatable. So a lot of people just don't like it.
I think you go back to. I just want to follow you here. The Sacred Cow, the avant-garde movement. You go so far out, right, and then there's no other place to go. So are you basically saying to bring it back make it sophisticated and educated, but not so far out where their ears are not necessarily accustomed to hearing that kind of music?
Well, I believe that when you're performing, that without being pandering and everything, that you have to consider what does this sound like, and I think of that, wild free playing. Although there are some people that play very beautiful free, and a little bit of it is nice. But it's kind of like if you went up to see a play and everybody started speaking gibberish for a minute, it would be really funny and amusing for a minute, and then it would be very tedious.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the way I see it. It's extremely tedious if there's no connection and people aren't playing from a form together. Although it can be a nice effect for a little bit, the intelligence is gone. It's like it's like a thing where people just talk and they don't make any. There's no story and nothing happens. They just talk and kind of like I'm doing.
Well, no, I do know it's. I wanted to go back in the time machine here. It's really. I mean, I kid you not. It was an album that really got me going as far as music was concerned, and really fell in love with the entire quartet. And I want to take a listen to it, and we'll come back and talk about it. Okay?
Which one is that?
That's a surprise. Name that tune. It's an earful test.
Okay.
So, you want to take a crack at what that was?
Yeah, I know what that is.
That's actually. Go ahead. Why don't you?
Well, it's Sam Ost and George Muribus and Will Bradley Jr. and myself, and it's a tune I wrote called PC. And it's interesting because I'm going to a concert Friday night, and I'm going to play that tune. I'm going to change the name of it to Bronco Rides Again.
Bronco. Now, PC. I was like,
It wasn't for Paul Chambers.
Well, I was going to say politically correct.
It was Previous Commitment was the original. I just had PC on it, and then that ended up on the thing.
That to me, that adds an element. I like the Bronco one, don't get me wrong, but I like the element of intrigue. But anyway, that was a Pat Smith original, is that not?
That's, me. My real name is Patrick Smith.
Yeah, but I'll always know you as Putter. But I mean, it's I just spoke to Pat Britt yesterday, and he told me to tell you hello and give you a big hug.
Great.
I love that guy, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about, before we get into the song, talk about how instrumental Pat was with this, especially with the Catalyst label and getting some exposure to those Southern California Titans.
Oh, he was marvelous. I mean, he recorded a lot of guys that weren't were really, really good, but weren't on the list of guys to get recorded, like Bud Shank and stuff. People like that, kind of like the other guys.
The other guys, yeah, that's right.
And he was very helpful, and he had a person that was working with him at the time named Kent Glenn, and Kent Glenn was kind of really instrumental in getting me together with Pat. And Pat produced one record of mine. It was called Lost and Found, and I was on one called Jazz Man. And he did recorded a whole bunch of people like Frank Strazzeri and a great bass player named Alan Jackson and Dolo Coker, and he just really got a lot of people. And then I got in trouble because the union came in and said, "How come all these guys you're recording all these guys?" And they came in and started talking real bad about Pat, and I said, "Well, I'm not going to talk about him as a bad guy because he's recording us and nobody else is." And so they took me up before the national board.
Wow.
I was the only one, because I was the only one that spoke up. And I got taken up to the national board. They were going to fine me $1,000.
This is because you were part of this union and that you went off in this rogue Catalyst thing.
Yeah.
That to me, it disrupts all the regionalism of the music. I mean, it just makes my blood boil. I mean, the idea that you had this, and I know it by heart because I have and see, Pat was, just going back for 1 second, because this is just so exciting. The Jazzman album, was that live album in San Francisco or that you did with him?
A Jazzman?
Yeah, in 75.
No, that wasn't live. That was down here in one of the studios. So
I mean, whether it was, Muribus, Bay Area guy, Flip Nunez, Michael Howe, Putter Smith, Sam Most, the skipper Henry Franklin, I mean, Charlie Owens, Dwight Dickerson, Alan Jackson, the list goes on and on and on. And those, right. Vince Ladiano, those guys, you guys are the heroes. That you're the ones that carved and made what regional music was. Quite frankly, you were that, Alan Broadbent as well, Don Menza. It was that you were carving out your own individualism, saying what you had to say, and I think keeping the purity of the music. That to me was essential. And the idea that you were going to be penalized for it is just, it's really upsetting to me, because these albums, they're great albums.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate what you say about that we were after the integrity of the music, because that's really what we all are. We're really after this great art that we've been moved to dedicate our lives to, and there's no money in it. I kind of equate it with deciding to be a poet. Hey, you're never going to make any money, but somebody might read this 100 years from now.
Right. Well, that's in many ways, that's what my goal of my show is. It's a legacy thing. I mean, I want my kids to know they can look back when they get into an artist and they say, wow, my dad interviewed him. Or all these people in Europe or Japan or in the East Asian communities, they can hear this stuff, because that to me is the only way this stuff goes on. I know it was below, if you want to say below the baseline, but it's kind of like, there were two factions. There were those that said, I don't want to be a starving genius, but there was also this other side, Henry's in it, you're in it to certain degrees, there were other cats, Pat was in it, it was about the integrity of the music, and more importantly, actually giving you guys an identity. And that's what I love the most: the pictures, the liner notes, and you got old Scrabble radio hosts that were, Chuck Niles. Those guys, I tip my cap to them. And when I talk to Pat, I know he's, his health isn't that great, and I know that he's not playing that much, but I really implored to him how much I wanted to do an interview with him, because the guy was getting at the heart of authenticity, which is absolutely void in everything in our society anymore.
Well, I almost agree with you on everything there.
except for I'm not, and I don't want to overgeneralize.
There are arts happening.
Absolutely.
And great arts too and everything. But this is a great art that reaches all the way back to the beginnings of European music and combining with African music, and now combining with every kind of music. But it's melodic invention, and it's like improvisation was an integral part of the time of Bach. When you see these guys they're reading chord changes. Only they wrote them in a different way. It would be they'd have a note in the bass like a C, and then it would say 6 under that. Well, that was a symbol for a chord. Don't ask me which chord. and it might have been an A minor. And anyway, no, that would be a C. It might have been, depending on the key singer. But anyway, that's
don't get hung up on that.
Yeah. Right. But improvising it's a very personal statement by the person. Bill Evans wrote a fantastic set of liner notes where he discusses group improvisation and how it's very different, that no one writer can ever can come up with the same kind of thing that a group of 4 people improvising together, even over what is the same general changes, because everybody's going to do slightly different versions of that and slightly different substitutions, and yet it'll all come out sounding very rich. And but it's a great art, and it's very intelligent art, and combined with great emotion, and then in the case of American music, combined with African time feel, which when we started was a very unusual thing. The African time feel was not part of American music, basically. I mean, there was swing, but like Michael Jackson is African time feel. I mean, there's and it really, what it amounts to is a great deal of subdivision and real accuracy, along with a certain feel.
Yeah, it's feel. And I wanted to. We talk about like Brad Maldau today, and there are other guys, and I have no doubt that they are sensitive, completely, listening. But it just seemed the propensity of those cats. I mean, I did an interview with Alan Broadbent, and the guy took a boat from New Zealand over to Berkeley. Mm-hmm. And then you had Muribus, rest his soul, Filipino cat, and you had Willie Bobo. And I'm sitting here looking at this George Shearing album. He's got Al McKibben, who is the African rhythms personified. He's got, Armando Peraza. He's got Willie Bobo. It strikes me that in some ways we were as diverse as we are today. We keep talking about sort of this, just in the election of Barack Obama last night, this huge disparity in race voting. Yet it seems to me that we were more accepting, and maybe because it was new, of putting together these multi-ethnic groups and incorporating all these Afro-Cuban sounds, bossa sounds, with jazz, with traditional American music. And that was okay. Whereas now it seems like we're less trusting or less understanding of who we really are as a people. I'd like your thoughts on that.
Are you talking about musicians or people in general?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't see although I should say that your albums reflect the diversity, but I wonder at that time in society, were we as did we have as little an understanding as who we are as people as we?
Well, I always thought that the jazz musicians were way ahead of the curve,
mm-hmm.
in that way, that they were. Even Paul Whiteman, who gets Whiteman, not white man, but he was a white man. But
yeah.
He was Paul Whiteman, who he used to be a kind of a joke to me, and since I've heard some stories about him, I kind of got to this guy was groovy, and he had black musicians in his band. But he would have to put up screens so the audience couldn't see them. But I mean, he was using them. He was giving them work and paying them well, like everybody else. There was a great violinist named Eddie South and some other people.
Sure.
And then Benny Goodman actually was, brought out brought them on stage publicly. I would say them. I mean, they're all us. We're all us, And so we're way ahead of the curve. And it's. I felt like. And when I was a kid, it was still extremely racist society. It still is a very extremely racist society. But when I was a kid, you recognize the genius, the genius of people like Bud Powell, Art Tatum, Charlie Parker, and I mean the Stone genius. Somebody's in Bach's neighborhood, and that because when somebody recognizes that, you gravitate toward it. If you're the one, you start gravitating. So all of the most intelligent, gifted black people became jazz musicians, because that was a place they could go. And now that society is legally opened up and really much more emotionally opened up, that you find intelligent black people becoming doctors, lawyers, and businessmen, and like that, and so that you're not getting the cream of the cream of all of the cream of the cream becoming jazz musicians. You're just getting the ones that are drawn to it.
That's really interesting. You said we're more open emotionally. Wouldn't you think that would cater towards more self-expression, more music, if we were more emotionally open?
Well, I think it is more. I mean, most of the music I hear now has a strong element of emotional, even though a lot of it is not my cup of dish. I can still hear the emotion in it.
Right.
And it doesn't particularly interest me because of the simplicity of the harmony. It's like they've thrown out 1,000 years of development, of harmonic development, and so when you hear songs that have only 3 or 4 chord changes in them, and they're diatonic totally, then it's just not interesting, especially to a bass player.
I wanted to just talk about working with Thelonious. Like these, you talked about we've always been a very racist society, and you've been on this planet longer than me. But how were those guys, through their self-expression with their instrument, able to refute that racism? You could see the genius. But when you were playing with Thelonious, what were the observations you made that proved this to you?
Well, he's very funny, and I never got any kind of racial prejudice vibe from him. But I had read stuff. I was, of course, a big fan. That's how I got the gig, is that I knew his music. But I had read at the point when Black Power emerged in the early '60s, I think, and there was sort of a strong negative, and denial of unity between black and white. That he was interviewed, and he said, "What about Black Power, Thelonious?" And he says, "Well," he says, "they come talking to me, and he says, I get to hate them pretty good. And then some real nice white guy will come along and just ruin it for me."
Right. I know what
So that I knew he was cool. And when I got the gig, I didn't get to meet him first, or he doesn't have a book. And so I just went down, and he was in the dressing room, and he was, kind of turning in circles, smoking, and so I just stood there, kind of like, here I am, but you don't have to look at me, And he stopped and looked at me and says, "You're the new bass player?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "White is right." so I knew everything was cool. I mean, it was like, like made me smile. Like, yeah, cool. And he was great. I mean, he gave me a few tests, on the gig, but then he really grew to dig me, and I grew to really dig him. And I got to hang out with him for over a period of a couple of months. And although we worked 2 weeks in San Francisco, and then we worked 2 weeks after about a month in between, we worked 2 weeks in L.A. at Shelley's which is where that movie thing came out.
Hey, Potter, just make sure, I want to hear your beautiful voice. I know you're not a singer, but I want to hear your voice. Speak into that phone as loud as you can.
Oh, you're not hearing me?
Yeah, that was
How's
a little,
that?
no, that's fine. Did you guys play in a trio, or was it
Well, it was a quartet,
Oh.
and it was Paul Jeffries was playing tenor,
Oh.
and in San Francisco it was Lenny McBrown was playing drums.
Oh, man. Hmm.
And then when we came down to L.A., it was Ndugu Chancellor. Only at that time his name was Leon.
Yeah, Ndugu was the one actually that when I interviewed him, and for those that Ndugu was the drummer for Michael Jackson among others, and played with the Skipper a lot, and George Duke, and obviously Putter Smith, and Thelonious. He's the one that I asked him about dealing with record companies, and he basically said there were only a couple that ever tried to screw him over, and he put those people out of business. He was the one that said I did not want to be a starving genius, and so he had to advocate for himself. And it was a fascinating. I just feel that the West Coast musicians or guys that migrated there, especially during the late '60s and early '70s. I mean, you had Motown moving out there, Hollywood, which you were a part of a little bit, and the propensity of work and the clubs, the propensity of work and the ability to interact with regular people who, they were able to hear the music and the emotion and see it. And I think you developed some camaraderie there. And I ask you to paint in this period for me because, obviously I wasn't around, but I can just tell that that ego was kind of put aside because insecurity was put aside because there were opportunities to really be heard.
Well, it was a struggle just to survive as a musician. It was a struggle, and without the help of my wife and support and encouragement, I would have gone to work for the government.
Thank God that didn't happen.
Well, I guess one can't say what another road where it would have led. I'm very happy to be where I am right now, but it was a commitment I made when I was 16. I felt like I had gotten a message, like from God or whatever you want to call that this is what I was supposed to do with my life, was to develop this music, this melodic improvisation, melodic invention, and carry it through and expand it and get better. And at the time, it was all you wanted to do was try to get to the point, have enough chops and stuff that you could play what you heard. And then it becomes, I need to hear more. I need to expand my hearing so I can hear more. And it's kind of been in that ballpark since I was about 30. You're trying to expand your hearing ability without being phony. And what I'll do is I'll hear a recording and it'll just kill me, and then I'll live with that for a year or something and listen to it over and over and over, and not by willpower, but because I'm drawn to it. Like I got hung up on Nana Caymmi, a singer from Brazil, and I got hung up on Bob Marley, and I got hung up on King Sunny Ade, and so elements of this stuff come into you. And I got the Nefertiti, the Miles album. I got hung up on that about 10 years after it came out. And when it came out, I had heard that band play their first gig at the Hollywood Bowl, and I was there to hear my brother, who was playing with Jerry Mulligan. They were having a reunion thing. It was a jazz concert. And when Miles came on, I hated it. They were playing. That was that great band, Wayne Shorter and all the guys.
Tony Williams, yeah.
Yeah, Tony Williams and Herbie Hancock. And I hated it. I thought they played Stella by Starlight. I thought, they're being so cynical. They're being so cynical. That's the way it sounded to me. And I wasn't ready to hear it. And then 10 years later, 10 years down the line, I was listening to the radio and heard Nefertiti. And I go, oh, my God, what is that? And I got the recording and listened to it over and over and over and over. I mean, like maybe 1,000 times. And they made that recording 2 weeks after that concert. So that's the way they were playing at that concert, but I just wasn't able to hear it. But my hearing expanded to where that, and then I got to where I knew every note on the album. I even knew where the whole band comes in a bar late, and all those kind of things, you know. And so that expanded my hearing, and so now when I'm playing what I'm hearing, that's part of what I'm hearing. And then King Sunny Odd Day, that just moved me so much, that the one record I had, and it did the same thing and just absorbed it. And so I just allow that to happen. And sometimes I'll actually sit down and transcribe something. Like I transcribed a Nana Kaimi transcribed the rhythmically what she was doing precisely. And she's like a percussion section, only with soft soul.
Wow. No, I mean, it's, the next track we're going to play is also, I hate, just for the record, for my audience, Putter and his wife sent me these incredible albums that I was poring over and doing a ton of work, listening to them while I was playing with my 8-month-old daughter. And in the haste of running out to her daycare today, I left the albums in my house. So I'm left to the bearings of what I have, but you've teed it up pretty nicely, Putter, with listening. So let's take a listen to this, and we'll come back. Okay.
Okay.
So you could hear the cackles from my daughter in the background there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so she's getting inundated with Putter Smith.
Uh-oh.
But no, but I think, what's cool about that is that correct me if I'm wrong, but Will Bradley Jr. wasn't playing on that. It was just a trio with you, George, and Sam.
Oh, really? I can't see on the phone. I couldn't tell that.
So talk about that without having the trap set there. How do you really hold that rhythm in as the solo rhythm instrument?
Well, everybody should be having that rhythm going at the same time. Like a great player like Sam Most or George Muribus or Sonny Rollins or Charlie Parker. You can take their stuff off and remove the rhythm section, and it's still like there's a rhythm section there. And everybody should be responsible,
right,
just like that. Although they people can really lay back and all that stuff, the rhythm section should still be in there and not dragging, and they can be laying back or pushing or anything, but at the end the tempo should be the same as it started, and that's just the way it is. Of course, you work a lot of gigs without drums, and I always prefer having a drummer.
That tune was entitled "I've Grown Accustomed to Your Face," and
yeah.
and I think it's an appropriate segue here to talk about you and your wife, 40 years of marriage, I believe.
It's coming up on 50. It's, I think, 47 right now.
47 years. So, I mean, you guys are accustomed to each other's faces. There's no doubt about that. And
I don't know. It's still a shock to me.
Did you talk a little bit about her and and how instrumental she was when you had that sort of moment where spiritually you were guided in this direction of music, and during those hours where you were questioning yourself, and how supportive she was, not just musically but as a partner?
Well, I think it's, first of all, anybody, that the most important thing, not, aside from, attraction and ethics and all that stuff, that they should like the same kind of music, that it's real important. I've read that when a young woman marries an old guy, that the worst part of it is the music, that they love each other in every other way, but I can't stand listening to that punk music. And she goes, geez, I just hate Glenn Miller. And so it's a thing. But anyway,
right.
we love the same music, and there's been times when I've really gotten, disenchanted with being poor, and she's just always pushed me in the direction of music. And you got to do them. So she feels the same about the music, and as I do, except even more so. And because when you have a couple of kids and you really are broke, you get pretty drugged, And she's always stood up for the music, always pushed me into the music. And even when there was a point where they kind of outlawed upright basses on gigs. You couldn't play at the Playboy Club with an upright bass. And I went in, Woody Herman called up, he needed a sub for that night, and I ran down to the gig and walked in with my upright bass. He goes, "What'd you bring that for?" Even a band like that, they were using electric basses.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and so it got to the point where I'd stopped playing upright bass, and she kept saying, "Play the upright." No, it's over. It's gone. It's like accordion or something. And she got my dear friend who passed away, King Glenn. She got him to beg me to play one tune. I hadn't played the upright in a year. I was working. Everything I was working was on electric bass. He begged me to just play one tune. And so I played one tune, and it was like I almost started crying, because there's something that happens with the upright bass that doesn't happen with the fretted electric bass. And so I began playing again immediately, and after a few years decided not to take any more electric gigs. And so I had
I'm curious. Well, one thing. Tell me intrinsically, what is that thing that is missed that will never be replicated from the?
Well, one time Thelonious, they sent him. Somebody came in to play the gig with electric bass, and he started to play, and he stood up and says, "Wrong sound." Okay, so that, he was pretty succinct in his
right
evaluations. then I've read this book about by Pablo Casals, or it's called Conversations with Casals and Further Conversation. He was kind of a hero of mine, and I don't mean kind of. He was definitely a hero of me and also of many, many other people. And he talks about intonation and the fact that you can really recognize someone by their intonation, and that's really what makes them sound different, is their intonation. And everybody's intonation is a little different. And that's what's different about the upright bass is you're like in the violin family. You can play your own personal intonation, and when you're playing an electric bass, it's just the same as pressing a keyboard. There's no you have no control over the intonation. The guitar is small enough that pushing back and forth with your fingers can change the intonation, and people do that. But like when you listen to a B.B. King, for example, you know right away it's B.B. King because he plays a certain way in the intonation. He plays very sharp, but it doesn't sound out of tune. It just sounds like B.B. King, And Art Farmer plays very flat, but it doesn't sound flat. It sounds like Art Farmer, So you can really hear these people. Jimmy Blanton plays very sharp, and it's great. It's great, It's the way they play, And in Indian music, the music of India, they equate sharpness with passion and flatness with sadness. So, it's a real personal thing. So I can tell Paul Chambers from Ron Carter, even if they play the same notes.
That's right. Bill Cosby, he told me when we did our interview, you could blindfold him in a club and he could tell you individually Mickey Roker from Philly Joe Jones, from Elvin. Everybody had their individual, and I guess what you're saying on the acoustic bass, you really can have your own individualistic style.
You can have your own intonation, and of course everybody can have their own style on every instrument, but the intonation is a big factor in when you recognize somebody. You go, oh yeah, that's them, and it's the intonation that's giving you that information, even if you don't know that's what it is. It just, that sounds like Red Mitchell. That sounds like so and so. And of course, in the time and the sound, you can definitely hear Art Blakey sounding very different from Shelly Manne. Both being great players.
In our remaining minutes here, Putter, I wanted to ask you. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. When was the first time you met Henry Franklin, and how did your friendship grow over time? And please, and let's get you up to that phone so we can really hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was working at Shelley's with Willie Bobo. I worked with Willie Bobo for 2 or 3 years. And,
unbelievable.
And that was great.
Yeah.
And he was working with Shelly Manne at the time, and Shelly Manne had a band that was kind of playing like the Nefertiti band. And I didn't understand it, and there were some great players in there, John Gross and Mike Wooford.
Was Roland Haynes in that band?
No.
No, okay.
No, Roland. No. Thank you for saying that name. I've been trying to remember his name for the last year. Roland Haynes.
Yes.
And no, it was Henry was playing bass.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he really liked my playing and let me know that. And also, I met him through Kent Glenn, and we actually got to know him through Kent Glenn. And he's just one of the most wonderful people, wonderful persons. That and he is one of the most unsung players of the bass. He's a great player and stunning soloist and perfect time player and solid as a rock, and because he lives in Riverside and like Riverside is like 50 miles outside of Los Angeles, so he's in the middle of nowhere.
He's in Paris, right?
Paris, that's I think it's Riverside County.
Yeah, it's out there. He's got the compound out there.
It's out there, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a great place and all that, and but that's why he doesn't get as much press. Of course, nobody gets much press here in L.A., but he really should have a lot more exposure than he does. But he does all right. I mean, he's out there all the time. But he's one of the great people in the world, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for him.
You know, it seems to me like he strikes me as one of these, you know, a role model. I know he is for me. He was like my fourth guest, you know, and I reached out to him, and I think he appreciates education. I think he appreciates information, and I think he's sophisticated enough to go through that and to also know people like yourself, where he giving you positive feedback. I mean, it probably made you feel more secure when he told you he liked your bass playing and encouraged you to move forward. You know, and I think
it's very, very inspiring when a great artist tells you you're on the right road. You know, it's always inspiring, and I always, whenever I play and he's in the room, I know I always play better because I know he's going to, whatever I do, he's going to dig it.
Did you? How did you've been on the Skipper, the label Skipper Productions for several years now? How did that come about?
Well, I think he offered to. You know, I was talking to him about we had recorded VR and that we really liked it, and we didn't know what to do with it exactly. I didn't even really realize I wasn't asking him, and he just offered, "Why don't you put it out on my label?" Jesus, what a great idea! And so we did, and he kind of told us what to do as far as getting the record finished, and so since then we just put out another one with her, and I put out one on my own quintet, and that we're going to do another one. So.
Actually,
of these days.
I think that you know, if I can throw in my 2 cents, the next album should be a live one at Pinocchio's if the owner would let you.
That's tough. It's tough recording live.
It is, but there's something about the talk a little bit about because there's no doubt that I will take a trip this summer, you know, up the coast and you know. The idea, I remember, I see these albums, Bagels and Bongos, Irving Field's Trio, you know, Pizza and Bongos. Talk about playing in a restaurant and being able to get the attention of the people that are not just eating, but also getting the experience of playing the music with VR right now.
Well, getting the attention of people, you don't actually try to do that. You just go in and play your music and be serious. I play as if I'm playing at Carnegie Hall every time I play. It doesn't matter where I am. I'm in a small room, but I'm always playing for the full thing, you know, the full thing. And so then when I do play on the place where I'm playing for the full audience, quiet audience, it's not a shock to me. And that's what I'm doing. I don't ever play like mail the part in or anything like that. I never do that. I'm just playing full out every time, and which sometimes you play much quieter because you know, they hired you to play cocktail music, and so you're just playing your ass off in the corner, but at a real low level, you know, but you're still burning it up, you know. And the funny thing is, and now you can get away with so much more than you used to be able to, you know. And like 45 years ago, you couldn't possibly play Oleo at a cocktail.
Right. I see what you're saying. Right.
Now you do that, and nobody even looks up.
You can get away with.
Got that's a tenor player playing like Coltrane, you know, and they could come up. Oh, that's really mellow, you know. Yeah. But you know, I don't try to attract the people. Although when I work with VR or with my own band, I always try to do a presentation because one of my heroes is Duke Ellington, and we had Duke Ellington in the house from childhood, and so I saw him before I was 10 years old. I saw the band several times, and then I had the great fortune to work in the same club with him, alternate sets for 30 days, but he's always been a hero of mine, and his approach to and it's showbiz. That's the approach. It's like we're putting on a show here, and we're you know, so you mix up textures, you mix up tempos, you mix up combinations of people. You bring in a singer, you bring in a magician, and I mean, they had all that kind of stuff, you know. And so when I do a concert, like we're going to play at the LA County Museum of Art Friday, we're going to map out the set, and the set's going to be like, it's not going to be sing the melody, tenor solo, trumpet solo, piano solo, bass solo, drum fours, melody out. It's not going to be like that. It's not going to be like anything. That might be one like that, but there'll only be one like that. There'll be another one where only the tenor solos, or only the piano player solos, or where there's a mix of stuff, and you're changing the textures and the tempos and the keys so that it maintains interest to the listener. And a great pattern for that is listen to a Bach cantata. They were like 40-minute sets with 7 or 8 tunes, and varied them up, varied the tempos. They had a funny thing in those days; everything would be in the same key. But I think that's a pretty good model to follow. Bach cantata, because that's what it was. It was an hour show, talking in between.
Did you? Who's in your quartet right now?
I have quintet.
Quintet, please.
And I don't have the wonderful alto player that I had kind of built the band around. His name was John Winery.
I heard him. Yeah, I heard him on that Home album. He's great. Yeah.
And he passed away. He had a very aggressive form of cancer and got real sick. And then they got it into remission for a few months, and then he went back out. It was just what a terrible loss. And he played. When you first hear him, he would sound like Paul Desmond or Lee Konitz, but he actually played like Warren Marsh, who he had studied with for years. And anyway, and then the tenor player I brought down is the guy I've been playing with for years, John Gross, a very original, wonderful tenor player.
Yeah, I'm headhunting for Gross. I need to talk to that cat. He's a heavy cat.
He is a heavy cat. He's the heaviest. I think he's one of the top players in the world.
I've never heard somebody that I just, my ear wasn't necessarily ready for John Gross. Not even on your albums, but again, on the Catalyst label, Mark Levine, he played with him. And I was listening to him play, and I said, boy, he is really doing some creative stuff, but I can't get around it. And now hearing him on the albums you sent me, just a titan, So you let him know I'll be coming to see him pretty soon. I'll be looking to do an interview with him as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, he'll give you some good stuff.
Continue on, please. Who else is in the quintet?
Well, the quintet was Kendall Kay and playing drums, and Theo Saunders playing piano.
Theo's coming up in our Thanksgiving show. I'm doing Theo, so I can't wait to talk to that. I just feel, Putter, at the end of the day, as we wrap this up, Henry and you and Theo, part of my responsibility here, because the skipper's been so gracious to me. He helped, I promoted a concert in South Central a couple of years ago. He was the bass player on it. Part of my responsibility is not just to highlight him as the godfather of music in Southern California, but also all the people around him who he cares so much about. So it was just really an honor. You've been one of the earliest guys that I got into music, and I just can't thank you enough for taking the time today.
Well, I really very much appreciate your interest, and you're welcome. And anytime you want to talk to me, I'm really happy to hear you. And when you can get in town, let me know. Come out and have a rib or two.
You better believe it, my man. We'll be in touch, Putter, and thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you all in a little bit.